Give it to me like.
Here we are, another day in December. Last week we talked about getting something that you wanted to accomplish in the near term, all right, like a goal, a vision, something that you wanted to basically achieve within the foreseeable future. Today, we're going to talk about what's necessary to make that happen. Welcome to Architect of Interest. Welcome back to Architect of Interest. Today, we're going to be talking about taking the vision that you created last week and getting that into some type of set agenda so that you can actually reach it going forward. So basically, we're going to go in some of the reasons why it's important to actually have some type of set agenda, and then also how to make it effective and likely to succeed. Okay, so the first element we want to have when making a goal is we want it to be concrete. That means we want it to be specifically identifiable, clearly identifiable, and not abstract. It needs to be concrete so that we understand what we're actually working towards. Like this wall behind me, which is made out of concrete, we know what it does, right? The purpose of concrete here in most facilities is structural in nature, and we actually have a clear understanding of what it does. So just like that, with your goals, they should be concrete. They should be clearly identifiable. So say you want to have more energy, and that's what you feel. That's great, but it can be a bit broad. If you just say you want to have more energy, that can mean a lot of different things. For example, we can have more energy by eating better. Right? If we eat better, we can feel physically better, which will lead us to have more energy. We can also have more motivational factors in our life, right? If something's motivating us to do something, we're more likely to have more energy because we want to do it. So you have to have a reason why. It has to be concrete. So just saying you want to have more energy is good, but let's tailor it a little bit more. So for example, say you want to have more energy because you want to feel more fit, right? Now that's understanding. Now we're actually getting somewhere, okay? So you want to get more fit so you feel physically better so that you have more energy. So for any time you're making a goal with any goal, make sure that it's concrete. Okay, so the second element is tailored, okay? We want it to be tailored to the specific goal that we're trying to reach. So whereas in the first element, it was concrete, that was narrowing it down to what we specifically need to get what we're trying to accomplish, right? This one is refining it further. This is actually making it so that we can understand specifically what we mean by that. So in the example that we talked about, we said we wanted to increase our fitness. Now, increasing your fitness can be done in many ways. You can swim more, you can lift weights. There's a lot of ways to improve your physical fitness. So just like we did with the first one, we got it less broad. Now we're going to refine that. So let's say we want to feel more fit by walking more. And walking is generally a good exercise for individuals of all ages. It's low impact and you can see results relatively quickly. So let's say your goal is to walk 3 miles a day, 2 days a week, or 2 miles a day, 3 days a week. That is something that we can actually quantify. It's important to be quantifiable, something that can be measured. So if we look back to the last week, we can say last week I walked 3 days, 2 miles each day. So we can determine whether or not we accomplished what we said we were going to do. So the next element, it has to be a realistic timeline. It has to be on a reasonable or realistic timeline. So for example, if you're not walking much currently, you want to make sure that you have an appropriate amount of time for you to build up to what you want to reach. So in the example we talked about, if you want to walk 2 miles 3 days a week, then you have to understand where you are at this current stage of your life. If you're not walking that much, then reaching 2 miles within the next week will be difficult. Whereas if you're somebody who actually walks already, say half a mile a day, it's not going to be as difficult and more attainable in a shorter amount of time. And that's why the time frame should be realistic. So let's take that example again and get into a little bit more detail about it so we can understand how this goes out. So if you want to walk 2 miles 3 days a week, which is a great ambition, you want to actually set a timeline where you're going to reach that, and it needs to be specific. So if you want to be able to reach 2 miles in say 2 weeks from now, as opposed to just saying I want to walk 2 miles 3 days a week by the time I reach 2 weeks from today, you'll say something along the lines of I want to be able to walk 2 miles 3 days a week by say December 20th or something along those lines. So it needs to have a timeline, and you need to be able to monitor it along the way to make sure that you reach certain levels by the time you're getting to certain stages. So for example, if you want to reach 2 miles and currently you're walking half a mile a week and you want to reach this within about 2 weeks, then you realize that you're going to have to start kicking it up to maybe a mile within the next week. Now, these are very general guidelines and these aren't necessarily specific, and they might seem seem difficult for some, and they might seem like absolutely not difficult at all for others. But just understand the idea. It's a matter of taking what you want to do and having a specific date, but it has to be a realistic date. Because if it's not, it's going to cause issues later. Okay, so now I want to give a few key elements to bear in mind when you're actually setting these goals. They'll actually help out along the way. So the first is to create a goal in general. You want it to be ambitious, but realistic. Okay, you want it to be something that's going to challenge you, but not something that's going to overwhelm you. And if you make it too difficult to attain, if you're overambitious, it's good that you have that ambition, but at the same time, if you're not going to make that goal, it's going to lead to disappointment later on. And conversely, if you make the goal just something that's underwhelming, something that you're sure you're going to be able to reach, you're not challenging yourself. So you're not making yourself move to the next stage in your goal process. And that's important. It's important to have something that you actually have to challenge yourself a bit for, but you have to, you want to challenge yourself. That's what the main idea of is when reaching a goal. You want to have something that challenged you, that you made, that you accomplished, and you can look back on and say, okay, I did this. The next thing to bear in mind is to consider your current abilities. Evaluate your current situation towards the goal you're trying to reach. So in the example we talked about with walking, if you're not walking that much right now, it's going to be more difficult to walk 2 miles 3 days a week than it is for somebody who's walking more. So you have to really consider what your abilities are now when you're making the goal. And this is especially important when you're talking about the timeline, because depending on where you are, that's going to influence how long it takes for you to get there. The final key, will, not want. Okay, so when you're formulating the goal that you want, use will as opposed to want. So for example, with the walking example, instead of saying, I want to walk 2 miles 3 days a week by December 20th, say, I will walk 2 miles 3 days a week by December 20th. The reason this is important is because it actually puts it in a definitive mindset. It gets you understanding that this isn't just some vision or something like that, that this is something that you're actually going to accomplish. Okay, so here's the brief summary of everything if you stuck to the end of the video, and I thank you if you did. And if you just tuned in or forwarded to this point, then I'm giving the summary for everything that we just talked about. So when you're making your goal, it has to be CTQT. All right, first C, concrete. All right, the next thing, tailored. And these things have to be quantifiable. And then finally, it has to be on a timeline. And again, this is a realistic timeline. And the key elements to bear in mind when you're doing this are be ambitious yet realistic, consider your current abilities and situation, and use will, not want. Okay, so get these goals together, start considering them, and set a timeline to start this, okay? Because this is something that you can do and you're going to feel a lot better once you begin doing this. Thanks again for watching Architect of Interest.